Ja, ja. Onda će biti super. Ej. Madam Minister. Hi. You're standing in between the panel and the panelists, so I have to intervene. Thank you very much for the invitation, Madam Minister. Deputy Prime Minister, ministers, ambassadors, Your Excellencies, it's a pleasure to be in Bled. I'm not going to give you a long introduction into today's session, but I would like to set the tone on a positive note. We listened for a couple of days about the new momentum in the EU enlargement process caused by the geopolitical context, which is obvious, I would say, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. And ever since this 22nd February 2022, which is one of those days that everybody remembers where he or she was, like 9/11 or I don't know, the day when the Berlin Wall broke down. This was one of these historical events that is designing the future of Europe and the future of a world. And ever since that day, the EU woke up from the sleep and started to trace a path that was not so brave earlier. And for the first time, we saw some very concrete measures. These days, after the aggression on Ukraine, we have a new forms for consultations, like European Political Community. We have a growth plan with its 4 pillars, which is aimed to engage region much more into the creation of regional integration, regional market, getting region closer to the single market. Even some new funds, which are very much resembling cohesion and structural funds for social cohesion and convergence, have been denominated to the Western Balkans. And what is perhaps the first sign of return of credibility of the EU when it comes to the enlargement process, Madam Head of European Commission, Madam President Ursula von der Leyen, came up with a strategic plan how to adjust the EU's structures, policies, finances in order to welcome new members. So, on that positive note, my name is Srdjan Majstorović. I'm chairman of the board of the European Policy Center, a think tank organization in Belgrade. I would like to open this panel. But before we start, I would have to excuse His Excellency, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, because he was forced to leave in order to catch up the plane. And I would like to excuse him for him not being here with us at this moment. But we have a stellar panel, I would say, and I'm quite positive that you will not feel anyone missing. I would like to start with maybe a country that is not a European country, obviously, but I like to call the United States, in a sense, a shareholders of Europe, in Europe, a country that is deeply economically and in security sense invested in the EU and helped, you know, to born Europe out of the ashes of the World War II. So here with us is His Excellency, Mr. Christopher Hill, Ambassador of the United States of America to Serbia. Welcome, Ambassador. And I would like to start by asking you a couple of very general questions, and then I would like you to give us your short answers. The title of today's conference is The World of Parallel Realities. I'd like to ask you, how does the US perceive Europe today, and especially this enlargement process? The session is called Europe Free and Whole. Can Europe be whole and free without Western Balkan 6, without Ukraine today, without Moldova, without Georgia? what is the significance of this U.S. strategic relationship with the EU in the scope of today's geopolitical challenges?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank the audience for hanging in there as well. I think every seat is filled. It is the fate of all American diplomats to encourage, or really to order, the EU to accept anyone who wants to enter the EU. This is what we do. In fact, it's a far more complex process, and I think we need to be respectful of that complexity. Why is it so complex, and why is the EU so compelling? Well, from our vantage point, it is essential that there is a Europe that is not whole, free and at peace, but one that we can work with very closely. Obviously, what has happened in Ukraine is something that has made European Union unity very important and transatlantic relations even more important. So I think we have all agreed on the need for a stronger and even bigger European Union. The issue is where do we go from here? I think the fact that the European Union has standards, and those standards exist for the membership of the European Union, and they do a lot of consulting with those who are not members, including us, but including many of the aspirants. But I think it's very important that the European Union has its standards, and I respect them for that. You know, there's criticism of the European Union for being too slow or for somehow missing the moment of history. In fact, the European Union is probably the most exciting thing and successful thing that's happened in Europe in centuries. And we need to respect the accomplishments of it, and we need to support it. So the European Union looks to complete its mission. And I think the fact that enlargement is very much on the agenda is an indication that Europe is seeking to complete its mission. And so it's, I think, a very positive development that we see the European Union looking at a lot of different members, whether in the Western Balkans or Ukraine, Moldova. I think these are very positive steps by the European Union. So what do the aspirants need to do to help in this process? Well, the first thing is, of course, when the European Union says open these chapters, open them and work on them. It's a very difficult process. It's very painful at times. But I think one of the things that the aspirants need to do, and I'm going back to the first enlargement, or one of the early enlargements of the European Union, and I think it's very important that there be developed among aspirants, among those wanting to join, a sense of working together, a sense of an understanding that really what needs to happen is for the European Union is interested in taking in many countries. They are not interested in taking in the problems of those countries. They want to see some real effort to deal with this. So if you think back to the time when Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia entered, there was a lot of competition there, as in pick me first, don't pick those guys, we'll be more helpful to the European Union. Didn't really work that well. But what did work was when they all met in a town called Visegrad and agreed on a process to try to work together as they came closer to the European Union. I think to a great extent we have lacked this Visegrad process. Never mind that the Visegrad process, I mean, some people talk about it today, but it's more of a historical fact than a political science reality today. But it played a key role at the time, and I think there needs to be a great deal of effort by aspirants, by anyone who has this goal, to try to work with others and try to create a circumstance where, especially in the Western Balkans, where we don't have a situation where each aspirant lines up with a member of the international community, or as they used to be called, the great powers. It's kind of the same thing, sadly, but rather where they talk to each other, and that's why things like the Bled Strategic Forum, I think, are very important. So where will we go with this? I'm going to be very optimistic. I'm going to be optimistic that the European Union understands the duty that it has and will look to bring in countries and to make sure that these countries develop patterns of cooperation together so that when they come in, they will be able to contribute. They will be producers of security rather than, and of economic growth rather than consumers of that. So I think it's been really tough. This war in Ukraine has shaken us all, but it also has convinced us all that we can hang together or we can hang separately, and we need to be together in this. And for this reason, I think you will find no greater proponent, supporter of the European Union than the United States. So,
can I ask you just a follow-up question? This is a year of super elections, and obviously everybody's watching.
Oh, don't ask me about elections. Are you going to ask me about elections?
I need to throw you under the bus. I mean, the question is, your country is so much invested in Bosnia, reconciliation process, in dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, in security sense throughout NATO. Do you see the risks pending on the outcome of the elections for the completion of Europe in this geopolitical sense?
Which elections do you mean? No. Look, I understand why you're asking that, and you can understand why I'm not answering that. But let me just make the point that the United States has been around for a long time. We know our duty. We know our responsibility. We know about the very special relationship that we have in the North Atlantic with Europe. We understand what the European Union is doing. We understand that there can't be a contraction in the European Union. It, to some extent, like the universe, needs to continue to expand. And so whatever happens to us, don't worry, we'll be okay. And the point is, you need to be okay too, and we'll try to continue to help. All right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ambassador Christopher Hill, this was a diplomacy one-on-one. The course of how to give a proper diplomatic answer to a question. We're moving on. Madam Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora of Kosovo is here with us, Ms. Donika Gërvalla-Schwarz. And it's a pleasure to have you here at a panel. Ambassador set the positive tone, and obviously I would like to hear your point of view of Kosovo, since EU enlargement is a strategic goal for both Kosovo and Serbia. But obviously the relationship is burdened by the past, and somehow 25 years after the conflict, we are still, I mean, the progress is not good. This is what I'm trying to say. Barely 6 years after the World War II, it took European six, together with the US, to create a European steel and coal community. So we have historical lessons that reconciliation through economic functional integration is possible. So how do you see, I mean, we signed a couple of agreements. We have a first agreement back in 2013. We have Ohrid agreement, which was not signed but accepted. So there is a lot of, I would say, legal basis for improvement of bilateral relations, but we are somehow stuck, and we are in very, I would say, ironic situation, or rather strange situation, where Kosovo is currently under so-called temporary and reversible measures by the EU. How do you see a current situation? Do you see the way out? Do you see a space for cooperation between Serbia and Kosovo in this mutual joint plan of joining the EU?
Thank you very much. Let me use the chance to thank Tanja again for bringing us again together and enabling the space so that we can discuss among us, but for the people out there as well, and find ways how we can overcome the threats that Europe is facing today. Because I believe we should talk about first things first. We are dealing again in the Balkans with the threats of war coming from one neighboring country, and that is why we need to go deeper when we discuss not only bilateral issues, but how bilateral issues, how the behavior of some of us will reflect on the European perspective of the Balkans and on security and peace in our continent. So I read the title Europe as whole and free, and the question that immediately came in my head was, do we talk about a whole and free Europe with or without Ukraine? When we talk about a Europe whole and free with Ukraine, are we as Europeans doing enough, all that we can, so that Ukraine has a chance to win this war? And are we doing enough to show Putin and his allies that this Europe, this European Union, is not the place where we accept neighbors to attack neighbors, where we accept and do not let them face consequences when they dare to attack even militarily a neighbor? Is this Europe the one that does react when Dodik in Bosnia-Herzegovina threatens with destabilization of Bosnia and even with splitting Republika Srpska? Are we doing enough? This is the question that I'm asking here, but this is the question that I'm getting every day from students, my children, and other young people as well, because what the generation of our parents has done in bringing to Europe this most successful and most meaningful project and union that the European Union is our generation doing enough not only to enlarge in a formal way, but to transport these fundamental values and principles which are the only reason why European Union exists and which has created a lot of chances for the member to have a flourishing economy and human rights and democratic standards and everything else. So it goes very much deeper than just bilateral issues, because bilateral issues are very influenced by multilateral actions. And if the multilateral actions are that way, that you get the feeling that the bullying one, and that those who are more strong and powerful because they are bigger and they have more weapons can threaten the neighbors, then maybe we have not learned the lesson of our parents' generation. And that is where we need the European Union to engage seriously, because it is not an engagement for one or two countries somewhere there in the Balkans, but it is an engagement for the peace and stability of the home of the European Union. In the 90s, we have seen what happened when Milošević waged 4 wars in the Western Balkans. We have seen how citizens of the European Union are paying the price. Yes, Ukrainians who are fighting for their freedom are paying the highest price that you can imagine. But the citizens in Hamburg and in Prague and in Stockholm and in Ljubljana and in Pristina and in Sarajevo are paying the price for Putin's war as well. So this is why we need to act united, and this is why we need to build dialogue and deterrence at the same time. Dialogue where dialogue is possible, but where dialogue is difficult, we need deterrence. So that sometimes strong deterrence, and this is what hold together Europe during the Cold War. So I know I'm not over-optimistic. I know that the most countries from the Western Balkans will maybe not 2030, but we will join the European Union. At the same time, I know that if the reaction of the European Union remains the same when we discuss the threats that we are facing, then some of the countries in the Western Balkans will not join the European Union. And then we will see that they will remain being allies of those who are against the European Union and who are against the way of living what citizens of Europe need to decide for themselves. So, without wanting to provoke anybody here, it is extremely important, because we need to share this with our young generations, which is our perspective when it is okay to attack each other and not being sanctioned by anything. So I agree with Ambassador Hill that this project is probably the most successful that this continent has ever, but that means that together with the United States, together with the United Kingdom, and together with those European countries who are not yet members of the European Union, but who really want to join the European Union, together with all of them, we will be successful at the end. How long the way will be, it will depend how brave our decisions will be in the future.
Madam Deputy Prime Minister, thank you for this answer, but can I ask you a follow-up question? In the past couple of months, we have witnessed a very vocal reactions coming from Kosovo traditional partners, allies, supporters, concerning the measures in north of Kosovo, and apparent lack of coordination with the partners. My question is, how do you reply to those strong messages? Are you concerned that that might influence the relationship with your partners in the future, and in a way influence the EU integration process of Kosovo?
The relationship of the Republic of Kosovo with the partners goes far beyond the daily jobs that we are doing. Kosovo is the most successful story of the West in a region that was not easy in the past. Kosovo is an American success story, and Kosovo is a European success story, because we needed NATO to stop war and genocide and to bring freedom to our people. And that is why this relation goes far beyond what we are doing on different places in these days. We believe that in Kosovo we owe our partners, friends and allies a state where rule of law, democracy, human rights, even minority rights are on the highest standards imaginable. And all international organizations that are dealing with measuring the standards are confirming that Kosovo stays as leader of democracy and rule of law in our region. President von der Leyen was yesterday in her speech during the opening ceremony mentioning how IMF and others do confirm the incredible economic reforms that were leading to benefits for everybody in Kosovo. So this is what we owe our citizens and our partners. Fighting corruption, organized crime, and increasing the standards of democracy and rule of law is the primary duty of our government, and we believe that exactly that is how we will join the European Union as soon as it will become possible. And what we are doing is, we had a discussion about opening bridges. Yes, we will continue opening bridges, because bridges are there to connect people and to connect cities. Bridges are not there to remain with the old symbols of Slobodan Milošević in a divided city. We will continue to offer to everybody the chance to live in security and in peace in our country, but that needs to be very determined when we fight illegal illegal structures, when we find illegal criminal bands that are threatening not only us as a country, but most of all the Serbian citizens in the northern municipalities. We will not stop doing the right thing just because on the other side of the border there are people not interested in seeing Kosovo prosper. And to be very, very open and honest to you, not what we are doing is a provocation to anybody. Our existence as Kosovo, as Republic of Kosovo, is the provocation for our northern neighbor. That is the problem. But we cannot disappear because we are there to stay, and we will continue in offering a better perspective for our very young people in Kosovo. We have an average age of 34, and this will be a continuation, dealing carefully with the needs of everybody, but at the same time showing, even in the northern part of our country, that this government cares more than Belgrade about their needs.
Thank you very much for this intervention. Now we're moving to Mr. Mihai Popșoi, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Moldova. Welcome to Bled. It's a pleasure to see you here. I had the opportunity to visit your beautiful country recently, and I was amazed by the level of enthusiasm with regards to the European integration perspective. Now, we all witnessed how lengthy and open-ended the EU accession process can be in the case of our region. Do you see potential obstacles that might influence the enthusiasm in your country, primarily concerning the territorial integrity of your country and the problem of Transnistria, obviously? And more importantly, how do you intend to address those issues? Do you have a plan how to move forward on these very important issue for your country?
Thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here in Bled in Slovenia. There are challenges, of course, but I'm happy to say that the Republic of Moldova is defying the odds. And despite enormous challenges, Moldova is persevering. Moldova is reaching meaningful progress. We have lost far too much time. We have lost 3 decades. And I remember for a long time we wanted to be on the Western Balkans train to the European Union. And we are sort of there. We are still learning this new reality of being an EU candidate country. But we are fully determined to make up for the time lost. And we are wasting no time. We are moving full speed ahead with our domestic reforms, because we know ultimately we are doing it for the sake of our country, for the sake of our citizens. And if it also helps us to join the EU, it's great, it's a bonus. But ultimately, the reforms of rule of law, combating corruption, improving human rights, consolidating Moldovan institutions, and having a fully fledged democratic state, this is what Moldovans want. This is what Moldovans wanted for a long time. This is what Moldovans have been denied for far too long. And when I speak about Moldovans, I mean Moldovans in Chisinau, I mean Moldovans in Comrat, I mean Moldovans in Tiraspol, in Bender, Moldovans in Belts, Moldovans all around Europe, Moldovans in the United States. We have a great diaspora there as well, and we count on them participating in the November elections. But the opportunities that avail for the Republic of Moldova present a very strong pull factor for integration. We have a very good chance now for a peaceful solution to the Transnistrian conflict, and we do not see any other solution than a peaceful one. And just to give you a taste of the reality, of the statistics, the Republic of Moldova, the constitutionally controlled territory of the Republic of Moldova, 70% of everything we produce, we sell on the European market. The Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova, 80% of everything is produced, is sold on the European market. So in terms of economic reconciliation and economic anchoring, the Transnistrian region of Moldova is very much there. And it also helps when Sheriff Tiraspol every once in a while beats Real Madrid on Santiago Bernabeu in UEFA Championship. But the fact that the business community in the Transnistrian region, much like the rest of the country, sees the future in Europe as this big land of prosperity, of human rights, and most importantly of peace, which we must admit, have taken for granted in our part of Europe. Now, we no longer have this luxury of taking peace for granted, especially today, after the 41 victims in Poltava, after the 1 month ago attack on the kids' hospital in Kyiv, where also Moldovan kids with cancer have been treated for a long time. So even Russian speakers and ethnic Russians in Moldova, in the Transnistrian region, don't want to have anything to do with the Russian world the way they see it in Bucha, in Irpin, in Mariupol, in Kharkiv. So the Republic of Moldova is firmly anchoring itself onto the European trajectory, something that we should have done a long time ago, and we are doing that in meaningful ways. Moldova is no longer dependent on Gazprom for gas. Moldova is building high voltage lines to connect itself to Romania, that is to the European energy grid. So economically and from the energy standpoint, we are more and more anchored in Europe, because from a values perspective, from a cultural perspective, we are as European as we come. I come from Prague, and I had the wonderful pleasure of witnessing a Moldovan soprano being in the key role in the Tosca opera, in the Czech State Opera in Prague. When I go to Budapest, I see a former Moldovan prima ballerina in the Hungarian opera, and now the prime instructor. When I move to other places in Europe, I see Moldovans doing great for themselves, doing great for Moldova. And then who are we if not Europeans? And now I'm pleased that we have this opportunity now to legalize our real estate back home, because many of us are full-fledged European citizens by virtue of having Romanian passports. Half of Moldovan citizens have Romanian passports. So it's almost natural, this path that we have embarked on. And the Transnistrian region, much like any other part of the Republic of Moldova, stands to benefit. And we are very eager to share these benefits. And there is a strong interest on the left bank to benefit from everything Europe has to offer. And we are firmly committed to peaceful reintegration and to reclaim our rightful place in the European family of nations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. These are very encouraging words coming from your side. I have a follow-up question, since Moldova is not excluded from this super electoral year, and in October you will have elections as well, which are going to be accompanied by a referenda on European future of Moldova. What are your expectations? How do you cope with the especially malign external influences which are present, I know, in your country? And can you count on European Union's support in that sense, in countering this malign influence coming from outside?
You're totally right. It's the second most important election in the world in October in Moldova. We do get a lot of support from our friends and partners, and we would not have been here in this point in time, being stronger and more resilient than we were just a few years ago, if it wasn't for the support, for the enormous generosity of our friends in Europe, of our friends over the Atlantic, of our friends in the free world, as President Sandu likes to say. And yes, we do get support in combating disinformation and building resilient institutions to combat more proactively this malign influence. We have put together a Center of Strategic Communication in Moldova, modeled after the experience of our friends in the Baltics. So we are stronger, more resilient, and we look forward to the time in the near future where we'll be able to share some of these experiences with other partners, because we are the front line when it comes to disinformation and Russian malign influence. And I must report that we are stronger by the day, because Russians are testing us, and this challenge makes us stronger. And we are thankful for all the support that we are getting in this regard.
Mulțumesc, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister.
Cu drag.
We are moving forward to Madam Professor Tanja Miščević, Minister of European Integration of Serbia. We set a positive tone on how EU is finally putting its wheels in motion in order to prepare for the enlargement. How does Serbia see these latest positive signals coming from the EU? And what are you doing concretely to meet the membership requirements? And especially, how do you address the skepticism of those who have doubts regarding Serbia, especially due to the lack of compliance with restrictive measures in the area of common foreign security policy, quality of democratic institutions, media freedom, respect of rule of law, and perception of corruption in Serbia. These are all difficult issues. Is the EU integration process a proper framework to address these issues?
First, thank you very much, of course, to Minister Fajon for again doing an enormous job in order, Peter Grk, I don't know if he is here, to do an enormous job to gather us here. Up to now, I had more than 10 meetings with the colleagues buzzing all around Bled, but it's really a very good opportunity to listen, but also to be heard in terms of what are you doing. As an answer to your question, I think that many people in the audience knows I am for a very long time, somebody who is following the enlargement policy of the European Union. Even the very beginning, that was the topic for my research. And nothing is as it was at the very beginning of the idea of the enlargement process. It cannot be even compared with the Big Bang enlargement. Everything is changed, learning from experience, of course, during the process of the previous enlargements. And that's why the topics which were not, or still not, a very hard acquis of the European Union are becoming a hard acquis, political acquis within the enlargement process. Do I say that as a negative? Quite contrary, extremely positive thing. That is what colleagues stress as an important thing. This is how we are approaching towards the European values, proving that we are sharing European values and building on the European values. Well, this is a great story, but it's not easy to achieve. Dealing with the most important thing, which is the rule of law, stable democratic institutions, media freedom, it took the European society, the Western Europe societies, centuries to build. We don't have a centuries. We have to deal with this swiftly, but properly, which is a huge challenge. How to establish a stable institution, how to prove that you are sharing the culture of independent judiciary in very short period of time. What is the track record which will prove that? Thinking about this, one truth out of the story is, of course, the truth of the involvement of the whole of the society into the story, which is not easy. We know we are now on the different side of the same coin, which means the European integration of Serbia, which consists of the government, but also the civil society together. But what are the ideas that we devised in terms of seizing the momentum that we see exists? And we do hope it's not only for new Troika trio, but also for the Western Balkans. One part of it is, of course, the growth plan, the idea that has been presented that we are working now, two parts of the activity. One being the reform agenda, the list of our activities, and once when we achieve them, vouch and prove that we did it, then those 6 billion is going to come into the region. But also the second part, which is less known now, and this is the accelerated integration into the single market or into some policies, which is equally, if not even more important. The agreement on conformity assessment, how to produce CE goods, a single European payment area, how to include us into the Euro payment zone, or transfer, not zone, but the transfer. And the most important, green lanes, speed up the procedures between us from the Western Balkans and Schengen. We learned some data which proved to be extremely important. 3,000 years per year, our trucks are waiting to enter European Union. 3,000 years per year. And you can calculate, I'm a poor political scientist, but you can calculate how much money we can gather out of speeding up this process. So there is a potential for our convergence, which is, again, another criteria for the new candidate country. Second, of course, is to speed up the integration process. I'm not going to go into details. Opening cluster 3 for us is very closely connected. Cluster 3 is a competitiveness. It's very closely connected with the growth plan. But also, we are working very hard on speeding up the rule of law reforms in terms of getting into IBAR, the vouching that we are fulfilling the interim benchmarks for chapters 23 and 24, which is extremely important for many reasons, not only because of the substance, but also procedural. And yet we are aware that there are geopolitical, of course, criteria and conditions. Rule of law as a criteria and condition is very difficult to follow. It will be very important to work together with the civil society, and that is something on this issue. I'm emphasizing the role of the civil society in that respect. But I also emphasize the issues which are as the CFSP alignment. But let me also remind you that my country is the only one participating in each and every of EU-led mission, that we are the only one preparing for the participation in civilian missions, that we are the only one part and with the agreement with EDA, European Defence Agency. That also constitutes a value, if I am not wrong. Our cooperation with Ukraine, humanitarian and otherwise, is also known, I'm sure, to every of you. And we are proud that we've been constantly asked by Ukrainians to help them to restore the electro-energy grids. We have the same type of equipment, but also all others from the Western Balkans, and we are the only one to help them. And yes, we understand very well the importance and our constructive approach to the dialogue on normalization between Belgrade and Pristina. And I'm not going to go into the discussion, and I'm not going to try to explain, but I hope that you will understand that the provocation was not on me being Serb, Minister of Serbian government, but the provocation was to the common sense. I mean, to respect the human, especially minority rights, and saying we are determined to continue doing unilateral activities is not the European value. It's not the European value also for more than 1 year to have a ban of trade. This is quite contrary. The basics of the free trade is on the free movement of goods. And to block the regional cooperation, integration even, especially in CEFTA, is not something that will help any of us in terms of promoting the European value. So I am not provoked as a minister Serb, but as my common sense is astonished with the way of explaining what is going on. But I'm not going to go into details in that respect because I would like us to seize the moment.
That's my follow-up question. I mean, it is obvious that we have different opinions, and still we have an obligation within the stabilization association process. One of the conditions is regional cooperation, which means that if we are not capable of proving that we can work together, cooperate together, live together, you know, it is going to be very difficult to prove to the EU member states especially the public in the EU member states. I'm quite positive that majority of people in this room are aware of the facts that you listed. But I'm afraid that majority of public in the EU have a completely different picture with regards to Serbia's image. So my follow-up question is regarding the regional cooperation. Do you see the opportunity for Serbia and Kosovo cooperating in their EU integration path? I'm not, putting you under spotlight to give me a straightforward answer, but I would love to leave this room with the sense of hope, that there is a hope for the citizens of these two countries in the future.
Look, Belgrade and Pristina are in the context of regional integration, participating since 2014 in Berlin process. We are participating also in so many of regional organizations under the criteria, condition, disclaimer in terms of the name and the status. It's not an issue. The issue here of the regional cooperation is to bring the benefits to the people. And there is no problem to discuss how we can help each other. Look, we are working together in terms of the growth plan, because to boost the socioeconomic development in the region should not be harmed with any bilateral issue. We actually did not mention even once the dialogue, because it was not an issue. It was the issue of how we can invest, attract investors even more.
Thank you very much. Hvala, Tanja, for your answer. Now, last but certainly not the least, the representative of the host country, Mr. Marko Štucin, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. Now, it might sound like a surprise, but disputes with neighboring countries are not exclusively related to candidates. The Slovenia had experience, we're not going to name it, with the Western neighbor during its own EU accession process. Later on, it has certain issues with the southern neighbors. So this is not something that is exclusive to candidates. I mean, my impression is that when it comes to resolution of bilateral disputes, in the Western Balkan 6 framework, tactical moves are somehow trumping the strategic goal, the broader picture. How did you manage in Slovenia to appease strategic vision and sometimes difficult tactical moves that could have an influence on internal political stability in the country and your goal to become a EU member? Your experience is very valuable for us.
Thank you very much for the question. We had to change our constitution twice before we entered the European Union. So now
it's not an easy ride.
It's not an easy road. And what I would like to point out is that when we are talking about bilateral problems or challenges among the neighbors, but sometimes also not among the neighbors, but with other countries, there are two types of problems. One type of problem is usually invented for the internal use of specific politicians or political parties in a specific country. Those problems are very difficult to address, because usually you have to fight the narrative with the narrative of why European path is the one that will bring you voters at the elections at the end of the day. The second type of problems are historical problems. The historical problems don't only go to the wars that we had in the 90s after the breakup of Yugoslavia, but they go much further. They go much further than the Second World War. They go to the First, Second, Third Balkan War, and longer in history. Saying this, it's nothing specific for the region. Also, the countries current members of the European Union had, of course, problems in history. Why and if you excuse me, I'll skip a little bit this part about the Slovenian experience, but I'll just maybe say why it's important to be aware of this, because it brings us to the essence of what European integration is. We're talking a lot about internal markets, digital, green, and so on. European integration from the start was all about reconciliation. And I would argue it's not only the most successful reconciliation project in Europe, I would argue that it's the most successful reconciliation process ever existed in humanity. So for the last 80 years, there was no armed conflict among any member of the European integration. And when we are talking about bilateral disputes, I think it's our obligation of current member states to share our experience, and our experiences are not only connected with reconciliation, but with economic growth, with safety, with security, you name it, free movement, free trade. Our obligation is not to convince candidate countries they have to do everything possible to join the European Union, but to share our experiences and show the numbers and explain why this worked for us. In our case, it worked extremely well. It's not only in our case, in case of every existing member state in the European Union, the process worked extremely well. One thing that perhaps I also wanted to say is that because of this, European Union in 2012, if I'm correct, was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. In the explanation for the Nobel Peace Prize, there was a big part of specifically dedicated to reconciliation. Ironically, after 2012, so after the EU got the Nobel Peace Prize award, I think 1 year later when Croatia joined, nothing happened anymore significantly in the sense of the EU enlargement. So now we are facing the situation that after the war in Ukraine, we agree in every forum that we attend, in every forum like this, in every ministerial meeting in Brussels, we agree that there is a geopolitical strategic importance of the enlargement for not only for the candidate countries, but for existing member states. The problem is, are we doing anything very concretely to make this happen? That's something that we are worried about.
And that's my follow-up question, exactly. I mean, it seems that the EU has rediscovered this geopolitical importance. And mind you, the war in Ukraine did not start 2 years ago. It started 10 years ago. Yeah. So it took us a long time to wake up and to see what's going on. But as I said, the EU has rediscovered the geopolitical importance of the enlargement. But do we have a consensus within the Council, about who, when, and how enters the EU? What is your perspective? What is your feeling within the Council? There is a political notion that this is important, but do we have a consensus?
I think we come here to the issue of question of parallel realities. So okay. back to the title of the
very convenient. Yeah.
So what I mean by this is that this is a nice panel, with people that probably know a lot about this enlargement, the problems, the concrete problems, and so on. But when we go to Brussels, Slovenia is one of the few still that would put concrete solutions on the table. The ministers would read the talking points saying how strategically important the enlargement is, but it ends there. That's the problem. So if your question was what to do, we know what to do. Enlargement is, process is a two-side process. From the side of the candidate countries, it's completely clear what they need to do. They have thousands of pages of acquis communautaire, and they don't negotiate with the EU, but they have to implement the acquis communautaire. So they have to make, to adopt the legislation, implement the legislation, and make it work. It's I wouldn't say it's easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's clear. On side of the European Union and existing member states, it gets more complicated. Why? Because we complicated the process so much that now at this moment, we need for each and every step in the enlargement process, we need a unanimity from everybody, which means concretely opening the cluster, unanimity from everybody, closing the chapter, unanimity from everybody, agreeing for that the country will start negotiating parts, the agreement, agreeing that it will become a member, agreement. And what's the solution? And I'll be brief. The solution is just to allow the countries to negotiate, just to, a very extreme solution would be open all the chapters with all the candidate countries and then execute your, let's say, rights of, political decision to have a say after the negotiation is being finished for a particular chapter. What we are proposing and what we also put on the table is to introduce qualified majority voting when it comes to opening the chapters. Not for closing the chapters, because this won't fly, but for opening the chapters. And if we are courageous enough, after speaking for a couple of years now how geostrategically important enlargement is, we need to do a courageous step in order for the candidate countries to be able to negotiate. And with taking out the possibility for veto for opening each chapter, we strongly believe that this is the only solution to let the countries to negotiate. And then through these negotiations also do everything possible to solve bilateral problems or bilateral issues they have in order to have successful result at the end.
Thank you very much for this honest answer, Mr. Štucin. Now I would like to open the floor for the questions. Before we already have some hands in the air, 1, 2. But before we go with the questions, 3, I would like to introduce you our 2 keynote listeners who absorbed all the wisdom coming from the panel in these past 45 minutes, well, 55 minutes to be honest, and who will have a chance to answer your question. First, should they want, or they could pass to the panelists. With us here, we have His Excellency Christian Schmidt, who is a High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Mr. Strahinja Matejic, who is Associate Director in the Office of the President of Eurasia Group in the United States. So the first question is over there, then we have one over there, and the third one here. Oh, sorry, Strahinja. I'm sorry.
It's a high demand.
Sure. I have a reflector coming to my eyes, so I'm sorry. Okay, so we have only one keynote listener, Strahinja, that's you. The first question is in the second row. Do we have a microphone or?
Is it on? Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Alen Gudelo, Initiative for EU Integration, for monitoring of the EU integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I have a question rather personal for the Minister Miščević from Serbia. How does it feel to be a Minister of EU integration in a country where less than 35% of population support the idea of Serbia joining the EU, which is the only country in the Western Balkans where the support for the EU integration is under 50%? Thank you.
Can we have more questions? The one in the last row. This is your chance to pose a question, so please feel brave.
Thanks. Davor Kunz, working for the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg, otherwise from Croatia. I had a question for the High Representative Christian Schmidt, if he wants to take the floor. Otherwise, it would be for Ambassador Hill. And it's regarding the OHR in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many would agree that, or most, that OHR was a very important, maybe crucial institution after the end of the hostilities in the country. Many today analysts, including at least one former high representative, think that it should be closed. They would all mention the caveat that the international community would need to ensure the rules of the game after such closure, including, of course, the guarantees for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I'm wondering, would you think that it should be closed, and if so, under which circumstances? Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, would you like to address this question?
Thank you. A little bit strange question. Nice for European Investment Bank, because maybe I'm the last to answer about this. It's just about coming. You allow me. We have here, and I thank Marko very much for referring enlargement as a strategic reconciliation project. If you and me would see that reconciliation has worked out in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that's your term. As long as this is not happening, and up to now you know that Bosnia and Herzegovina was unfortunately unable to meet the requirements for the growth plan. Why? Because there was no consent. There is a possibility for consent, but it never ever had sufficient reconciliation there. This is our dramatic shortfall of the international community. We thought we bring down the wall, we make a kind of Dayton, and everything is working. It is not working. Why? Because there is indeed exactly the need of the experience of reconciliation. So I think, sorry to be very blunt, you're absolutely wrong, because you have no impression about the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have the issue of secession. Milorad Dodik, where Tanja has to work a lot with him, sometimes has the idea of secession. What is this? This is bringing off the structure of post-war Western Balkans. If we would go for this, I wish us all happy journey to do this. So we have to sit and stand and work together to avoid this. Why? Because I think reconciliation of the people is necessary and doable. But the political class, and you allow that I think there are a lot of good ones in the political class, but unfortunately in its together, up to now, it's a lack of ability to act fastly. As we know that the young people, and you all refer to young people, in their expectations, they will not want to wait another 21 years since Thessaloniki. What to do? I think waiting for taking all the acquis, Marko, you described this is a little bit a long time. We have to find a way to get a twofold way of reconciliation working, and this cannot come only out of the international community. But I think it is a question for regional cooperation. And there I have to say and have to see that we have to do a lot more. Reconciliation is not an easy project. This is not gathering only in forums and being friendly diplomatically to each other. That's very, very, very hurting, harsh, and disappointing. And this procedure, this needs a society, a civic society, which is prepared to do this. By the way, the idea of European integration of Jean Monnet, Konrad Adenauer, and Robert Schuman exactly was about this. And if I today could say Franco-German relations are, if they have some slight different opinions. This is only about the actual politics, but never ever about the strategic understanding that reconciliation is necessary. I'm missing this in the Western Balkans so far. I don't blame anybody, but I have to state this. And if we will not come to this kind of reconciliation, your discussion of OHR or any other institution, this is overdone. Just go for the basics, and then it will dissolve itself. I would be happy to be one of a former High Representative and telling the future what to do. But I'm here in this situation to care that election integrity is implemented, as it has not been possible in Bosnia and Herzegovina to do this. There we are. That's our job together. And I would like to link this in a situation when reconciliation is possible, that we go off as international community and more the regional cooperation would work. So thank you very much. It was very interesting and, should I say, encouraging what you said about this all. But we will not win without making us understanding that without reconciliation and without reducing the different numbers of different truths of the history, it will work out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. I would invite Mr. Matejic to give his answer before reverting to Ms. Miščević to answer the question of a gentleman in the second row.
One, two. Oh, there we go.
Excellent.
More of two comments and a quick question. The first one, I come from the private sector, unlike the entire panel, and we deal with in geopolitical risks advisories and consulting business. We often say that institutions are sticky. So especially in the Balkans, I think about UN Security Council. If you asked an average American diplomat in 1949 already what he or she thinks about the Soviets in the UN Security Council, the answer would be different than only 4 years ago. But we still are in 2024, or vice versa, if you ask the Soviets or the Chinese about the French, the Brits. Yet today, we still have only 5 members. Why are we not allowing Germany or Japan, who have stronger democracies than some in those 5, and stronger economies? Well, because they started World War II 80 years later. So institutions are sticky. So we defend the institutions despite them not responding to the original problem that they needed to tackle and to begin with. So in the Balkans, I think the gentleman from Luxembourg, Croatia, Luxembourg, raised that issue. I think if those particular institutions are not working for 3 decades, maybe it's time to think about a new approach. The second thing is about the political will from Brussels writ large to accept new members. Since the very first enlargement, and it's been, 6, 7 waves now, it was always a political decision, not an economic one. It was primarily a political decision.
Even geopolitical.
I was about to say, so if you are admitting 3 former authoritarian regimes of the Mediterranean states in order to ensure that they become democracies, is the new geopolitical reality. If you have apogee of states in 2004, Slovenia included, but also the V4, the Baltics, etc., it's a political decision, let alone Romania and Bulgaria, all the respect to them, but it was a geopolitical decision to get him into the Western camp. So let's not fool ourselves that, sure, Pristina, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, the entire 6 and then the other 3 need to change, but it needs to be a political decision. All right, guys, you got to come in. Obviously, it's harder with every next step, but that's a key. And then finally, to Ambassador Hill, can I have a ride with you to the airport? No. I have the actual question. We, in geopolitical advisory, put percentages and base cases, tail risks, etc. In your expectation, in 2 to 5 years, will we need more EU, US, and other international community support for Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, or less? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would offer first Ms. Miščević to answer and then invite Mr. Ambassador to answer.
Thank you very much for your question. It's always challenging to be Minister for European Integration. Regardless of the percentage of the support, this proves to be one of the most challenging jobs because there is a false idea that you are negotiating. You, especially abroad, you are negotiating, especially inside your own country. So you have to go into the local communities, into each and every ministry, into each and every chamber of commerce or something in order to get the proper information how to reach the possibilities. You are not negotiating a key, but you are negotiating the criteria and conditions for you to accept that key. So I think that each and every of my colleagues will say the same. It's very demanding and difficult job. But you are right. The problem is double more difficult if you are facing the lack of trust in the integration process. And that is happening for several reasons. First, because of the span of time. As Mr. Schmidt said, do we have to wait another 21, 20 years for something serious, something tangible to happen? So people are getting tired. Second, that is something that I've never discussed with Srdjan, but every accession is geopolitical, but our decision is political one? Why our decision of the Western Balkan is not a geopolitical one?
Yes.
It's supposed to be geopolitical, not only political, huh? We never discussed this. I'm not opening this.
A role in politics.
Yeah, but it's interesting that how come that after 20 years the window is open because of somebody else? That is, again, a story and a question that I'm sure you are getting also in Bosnia and Herzegovina each and every day. Third thing, we were never very Euro-optimistic in Serbia. The highest percentage that we had was around 70 when we got the visa liberalization back in 2009, and it lasts for a very small period of time. But those who are against the European Union is a constant percentage. So swing are the problematic, and this is because of the different reasons. And let me finish answering directly to your question. Is even more important my work as being a Minister for European Integration in the situation when the support is going down.
Mr. Ambassador?
So this is the question on betting on whether there'll be more money. First of all, I'm not in the private sector. I'm in the public sector, and I don't bet on games that I'm playing. As for the appropriate funding levels, I think people need to keep a few things in mind. First of all, funding levels are public, it's public sector spending. And I think the people in the Balkans or wherever need to make the case that taxpayers' money from whether it's the US or the EU is being well spent. And ultimately, you know, and I represent US interests. And if I don't think the money is being well spent, I wouldn't support it. You know, we have to go in front of Congress, explain why we're doing this. So I think to a great extent, people need to understand that this is not some right to receive funding. Anyone who's done any kind of fundraising, even in the private sector, understands that you have to make a good case for why the money ought to be here and not there. And so I think to a great extent, what bothers me about what we're dealing in the Balkans is precisely this issue of reconciliation and the need for it. Because you know, no country, whether the United States or a group of countries, can be providing funds to people who are not interested in reconciliation. There's absolutely no point to it. And you know, I've served in Africa. There are a lot of countries there that really need it. And so we got a little impatient with the idea that people are owed it. So I would like to see a real uptick, a real effort on on the issue of reconciliation. I'd like to see a little less concern about who the referees are. I mean, should there be a high rep or should there not be a high rep? Hey, let's look at the parties involved. Are they doing what they need to do? I think we have a long way to go, but I think we really ought to put aside some of the pettiness that goes on in these issues and try to address, what's in our interests, what's in your interests, where can we find some middle ground? And all of this is something I think the EU has an absolute right to expect when they consider enlargement of membership.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Allow me just to briefly take a couple of takeouts from the session. I think one of the major words that we heard is community, or rather regional efforts to address the issues. And I would say that when it comes to European integration process, we are in the same boat as a region and as 3 Eastern European countries. And I would say also that it is up to us, basically, to see whether this boat will sail or is going to just float around and remain idle. The second point that I would like to raise, that we need more examples of joint activities and joint initiatives. We are missing the response from the region and from the candidates to the EU's preparations for the enlargement. I would expect more joint activities up to the discussion of the new multi-annual financial framework, demanding more finances in reverse to more reforms in the region. I also would like to take the notice that this is not about Western Balkan 6 anymore. We have 2, potentially 3 new countries in the group. And cooperation with the Eastern European candidates should be very high at the agenda of the countries in the region when it comes to the EU enlargement. And finally, on reconciliation, I would dare to say that it is pending on the political leadership, as Mr. Schmidt pointed out. You cannot expect that there will be a reconciliation among societies. I was very much annoyed a couple of days ago when I heard one very high-level European politician saying that Kosovo and Serbia societies are not ready for reconciliations. My reaction was, give me a break. If we had brave leaders who would show that they're willing to break the path and to walk the walk of reconciliation, the societies will follow, I'm quite sure. You have numerous examples of war veterans cooperation, people who were shooting at each other, that proves that reconciliation is plausible, even if these people were shooting to each other. But I'm afraid that while political leaders are the ones who are playing these dangerous games of fire starting and firefighting, reconciliation is not going to be possible. But to finish on a positive note, I would like you to join me in giving a big applause to this excellent panel that we had a pleasure to listen. And I beg Madam Minister of Foreign Affairs for apology for being a bit late, but I think it was a worthwhile discussing this important issue. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.